Oh no.
Okay, we're gonna start very casual and go into the conversation a little bit more. So hopefully by the time we start talking, it's just still very organic and not weird.
Okay. Mm.
Cool. Well, I don't know. I'm not good at hosting. Give me a second. All right. So, hi, Jade.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me. I
Mhm.
really been looking forward to our discussion, and I think it would be interesting to have you as my first guest in our first discussion on this channel because of how we are related and also our shared and similar experiences that we've had. So, how about you want to go ahead and start us off with who are you and what would you like to share about yourself in regards to this channel that's focused on, trying to highlight underrepresented stories and voices within outdoor spaces. So, yeah, you want to go ahead and kick us off with introducing yourself.
Okay. Hi. I am Deidre's sibling. Um, we have known each other for our entire lives. Um, I,
Well, your entire life, not my entire life,
well,
because I
you know,
came
okay.
before.
Semantics. Um, wow. Putting it in this context, I don't know that I've ever thought about it in terms of like how being in outer spaces has impacted me in this particular way, but essentially, funnily enough, had just graduated high school, um, and I didn't like know what I wanted to do. Was having a hard time finding a job because I was freshly out of high school and I had no job experience. And then a friend of Deja's had been working in Yosemite National Park, and I heard about the experience through that. Applied, got the job, moved, and my life was changed forever. I've been in and out of outdoor spaces ever since then. Yosemite is still my favorite place in the entire world. Um, and I have traveled to other continents, and it's still a really special place for me. Especially not just thinking about myself, but also thinking about the people that I interact with. And I didn't realize it until I got older, until I started seeing my sister and other friends of ours in outdoor spaces that I realized how few of us there are, and how I didn't really see that representation growing up, especially as Deja has said, we didn't really grow up in a very outdoorsy family. Um, so I didn't realize it was an option. I remember going camping for the first time, um, with some friends, and it was something that they had done for years since they were kids, and I had never had the opportunity, and I didn't realize it was there for me until I was much older. Um, and I think that sucks. I think getting outdoors and seeing the world, especially in all of its natural beauty, is really important.
Definitely. So, what was your experience like when you were working and living in Yosemite? Because I'm assuming, like, did you have other introductions, like, recreating outdoors or like going to national parks prior to you working in Yosemite?
I think if I remember correctly, at some point in middle school, I want to say, we had like a short day trip to Yosemite, and then, like I said, camping with friends probably at some point in high school. But other than that, I really didn't know anything about outdoor spaces. Like I really knew nothing about national parks, state parks, anything like that. I maybe experienced them here and there, but for the most part, it was very new to me up to the point of me working in Yosemite.
And like those first instances when you were introduced to these spaces, like what, how was that like for you? Like, did it feel like you were like being included? Like were people pretty understanding of like maybe you not even knowing how to set up a tent, for example?
Mm.
Like little things like that. Like how was that for you?
I mean, the thing is, so the camping experience in particular, I was going with like close family friends. Um, I'm not going to name drop here, but I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. Um, but it was very much like a familial sort of environment because I was going with
Mm,
friends and their family.
mm,
Um, so everyone was kind of like pitching in and helping as they could. I didn't really know what was going on. And I wouldn't say that there was a sense of like, oh, like you're not helping, you're not doing anything, but it was more of like a you don't know how to do anything, you've never done this stuff before, so we're gonna do all of it, and you just kind of experience
mm.
it, which was cool, you know. I guess compared to some worse alternatives, but also it was in hindsight isolating in its own way. And it gave me that sort of comparison to think about later in my life when I was much older and still very inexperienced. Being outdoorsy, for lack of a better way of putting it. I definitely had mm, more experiences in terms of feeling kind of like isolated in my lack of knowledge, but also even being in Yosemite is still a very like loving community. And the experiences that I did have where I was confronted with that lack of knowledge, usually it wasn't a direct people weren't directly like, hey, like you're not doing this right or you don't know how to do this. But it still felt, I still felt the weight of um, the lack of knowledge.
Mm. What would you say, like, how would our family talk about the outdoors and like
Mm.
anything in regards to outdoor recreation when we were growing up? Because as you were talking, I was like kind of thinking about that in my head, and I was like, huh, like I don't even remember like even there being conversations around like let's go outside and like intentional like let's be in nature. I think it was like let's go to the beach but we're going to go on the boardwalk or like we're going to go to these stores, you know what I mean? Like it was always like other components of being in those spaces, not necessarily like we're going there intentionally to enjoy just being in nature, right? Being near the water or whatever. And so, what do you remember or recall about how our family would or would not talk about being in the outdoors and like actually spending time there?
Um, I mean, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I'm trying to think about um, when we did kind of go out and do things as a family. Uh, I think really like it was mainly going to the beach, and even then it was like going to like Santa Monica or Venice or something,
Mm-hmm.
where it was like I mean, I will say through those experiences, I developed a love of the ocean. And like to this day, I'm always like, I haven't been to the ocean this year. Like, I need to see it. But I don't know if that says more about me than it does about our family. Um, that's a whole other can of worms. Let's not get into that. But yeah, definitely, even growing up,
Yeah.
like thinking about playing with my friends, there wasn't really a push to be like, hey, like kids go outside, be outside. And when
Mm-hmm.
we as a family did like stuff outside, it
Mm-hmm.
was like we're going here to do something and not for the like express reason of being outside and experiencing nature. Like I don't even think I really understood the concept of nature until I was much older, until I
Mm-hmm.
had other people to influence me and be like, hey, the idea of being outside is something to consider and enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the idea of recreating outdoors or just like being able to leisurely enjoy being in nature, I almost feel like there was like an idea that it cost money. Like it was something that was like a luxury to do that, right? And so I think having worked in Yosemite and then like a big part of, working in Yosemite was hanging out by the Merced River. Like that was just like what you did if you had some free time or you were on a lunch break or something. And
Hmm.
so yeah, I remember my first summer there and like hammocking on the river for fun. Like if I was like, I have like 30 minutes or I have a couple hours this afternoon, like I'm just gonna take a book and like walk over, set up my hammock and just chill. I remember like that was like weird for me to start incorporating that as like a regular thing. Like I had to really think about it. Whereas now it's like, it almost is something that's like, oh yeah, I've got some time to go do this outside or whatever. So yeah, it's funny that the way you're describing how we really weren't encouraged to go outside. Like I remember it was like, oh, go play outside with the kids in the neighborhood every once in a while. Like we'd kind of have that, but it really wasn't like, with the intention of like really connecting with that space or just being, just existing in those spaces. Yeah.
I will say, I was thinking about it. I was like, I feel like I spent some time outside, but now that I'm thinking about it, um, like not me, but like going outside to smoke a cigarette, or it's like, oh, you some people are outside because they're smoking. It wasn't, again, like for the express intent to be in the outdoors.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, and it was always like, oh, gotta go outside to go do this. It wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I get to go outside and get like some fresh air. It's like, oh,
Exactly.
I'm gonna go out to smoke a so I wanted to touch on just like some of our shared experiences in Yosemite. And like when I say that, what are some of the memories that come to mind for you of like time that we've spent together in Yosemite, whether it was when I was working there or before I was working there and I was just visiting you. And before you go to that, as you're thinking, some context for people who don't know, Jade had worked in Yosemite before. I ended up working there. And I think, I mean, how long were you there? I think it was at least 2.5 years. You'd
Something
been
like that,
working
yeah.
there prior to when I started working there for my first season, summer 2017. So yeah, I would go visit Jade like whenever I got the chance and had other friends working there and had met friends through Jade and had met friends through some of my other friends that were working there prior to Jade. So I would visit like as much as I could. But yeah, I have some memories that come to mind, but I want to see like or hear what memories come to mind for you of times that we've shared together in Yosemite.
I would say probably probably the most prevalent would be and you're like just come up for the day and we had like gone bouldering or something. But that was like also the first time that anybody had like come to visit me while I was living in Yosemite. So like that in general was big, but
Mm,
also like especially it being you, because you've always been the most important person in my life. So like I distinctly remember that. But also uh I'm thinking about, I don't remember exactly when it was, but you had come up and we had celebrated your birthday. It was when you had the the locks, I want to
I had
say,
the
or was it
faux locks,
braids? I don't
yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Um, yeah. I would say those are probably the two most like standout moments prior to you working there, and then other stuff. I don't know how in detail we're gonna get here.
Well, the first two things that come to mind for me was I came to visit you. I was on a break from college and I can't remember like how long I was there for, but I think it was like a few days. And I remember I took the Yarts up to visit you. And remember we went up to Tuolumne and that was my
Mhm.
first time ever going to Tuolumne with your friend Sam.
Oh yeah.
But it was so cool. And I remember going up to the high country and like seeing Tuolumne River and like the domes up there, the big granite domes, because you know, the high country is so different than Yosemite Valley when you're just in that like granite valley, granite bowl that's
Hmm.
like, in the valley. With the river going through, it was just so different. And I remember like kind of walking up Lambert Dome and it was just really cool. But I'll never forget that day. And I remember like I always remember that picture of me like on the bus with like my braids
Hmm.
in and like, feeling being ready to like go outside and hang out with you. And then the other thing that comes to mind is, and I always think of this fondly, that you're the person who taught me how to ski. Like my first ski lesson was with you
I forgot.
at Badger Pass. So I always think about that when people talk to me or ask me about like how did I get into skiing or how did I learn? I was like, oh yeah, my
Oh
sibling
my
taught
God.
me in Yosemite. And then people are like, what? There's a ski resort in Yosemite? I'm like, yeah, Badger Pass. So yeah, I think about that because that was literally my first time. And then really that was like the only lesson I ever received and like formal lesson. Because do you want to talk about, how you got into what led up to you teaching me how to ski? Like, why were you even at Badger Pass? What were you
I
doing
mean,
there?
first of all, so many things led up to that. So many little things in my life, both of our lives. Long story short, I had come back to Yosemite, um, kind of just like hoping to like find a job for the winter. I wasn't really sure what I was doing in general with my life, let alone like in Yosemite that season.
Yeah.
And a friend of ours had introduced me to the manager of the ski school for the season. And he was like, "Hey, do you know how to ski?" And I was like, "No." And he was like, "Are you willing to learn?" And I said, "Yes." And he was like, "Okay, like apply for this job online and I'll see you in 2 weeks." And one thing led to another, and 2 weeks later, I showed up for my first day of work and they taught me how to ski. And then within like 48 hours, I was helping teach a class, which is so crazy
Crazy.
and probably not legally a good idea, but like it worked, and I definitely taught people how to ski.
Yeah. I mean, you were, to be fair,
So,
on their end, you were teaching like the very, very beginners, like literally people who had never been on skis before. So they weren't putting you with like,
oh
with
yeah.
people who were advanced. But yeah,
Yeah, no, I
there's,
wasn't like coaching people or anything.
yeah, definitely something you probably wouldn't have been able to just like in 2 days be teaching people if you were at like a
Yeah.
proper ski resort anywhere else. But really
Mhm.
cool that you got that opportunity. So yeah, what happened was I wanted to learn how to ski and just I was able to come in and jump in on one of Jade's lessons. And so yeah, and then went on from there. Yeah, pretty
Crazy.
cool. I wanted to kind of circle back to something you had said earlier about working in Yosemite. You were describing like your experience when you had gone camping and had kind of compared it to your experience in Yosemite, as far as it feeling like it was inclusive and like welcoming. And so I wanted to see if like you have any specific examples or memories that come to mind when you think about the inclusivity that you experienced in your time in Yosemite.
Oh man, so many things. I mean, I've thought about it a lot over the years. A lot of things that I've rediscovered in hindsight. I think in the moment as I was experiencing it, I came into Yosemite, I came into the job, I came into the community at a very particular time in my life. I was I'm just trying to think of like what to say, what not to say, how to summarize, or what to leave out. Um, I mean, it's like it's important to me. I just don't know how much I want to like put out there on the internet. Anyway, um,
We can keep it general, like, yeah,
yeah,
well, just
I've
give
also
some like examples, general.
yes, I feel like if I go too far into detail, we're going to be talking for like an hour. Um, but that's the thing. It's like yes, like I'm like thinking of specific examples, but I feel like there's so much context that really highlights why it's was so like memorable, so pivotal. But I'll think of something else.
Mm,
Um, I mean, like that was the first thing really that I had done after graduating high school. We had moved around growing up, but that was the first thing that I'd done on my own. That was the first like social environment that I was experiencing completely without anybody that I was
mm,
familiar with.
mm,
Um, and that's like the beautiful thing about working in national parks, seasonal jobs in general, but especially like working in places where you're very quickly building a community with people that you otherwise have no like. connection to prior. Um, everyone had that same experience. Like they were coming from places, um, from other places that, what am I saying? They were coming from places, no, give me a second. They had also like not experienced places like Yosemite before. So obviously there were people that were returning, but a lot of the people that I interacted with were first timers as well. And we kind of bonded over those experiences. So that in itself felt inclusive because we were all, taking those first steps together. But
Hmm.
also, God, I'm trying to think of specific examples. I will say, working in Curry Village in Yosemite Valley, uh, as a first job is wild. But I particularly remember there was an older black man that was a cook um at the like eatery. I don't even remember what it's called. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Um, but like I remember thinking about it in the moment, being like, ah, okay, there are other black people in this space. There are other brown people. Um, and also almost in a way, unfortunately, I was like, oh, okay, like it makes sense that he would be a cook. Just because like he's older. Oh my God. I can't even imagine how old he was at the time. Maybe late 50s. And I know he's still there now. Um,
Mm.
but yes, definitely interesting to kind of like see that. But it didn't really stand out to me until again years later, and I was like, oh, I can look back now and like count on my hands how many like black people that I saw in those spaces. I'm like, yes,
Mm.
there were people of color in the area. Some of the people had even grown up in the area, which was like really cool to me. 'Cause I didn't realize that was something that anyone could do. But it definitely, once I kind of had that pivotal moment of looking back and being like, hey, wait a minute, like you always getting mistaken for other like black women in the outdoor space, especially in the Sierras. Um,
Mm.
and also something that happens to me. I mean, people have always mistaken us for each other, which, we're sisters. Yeah, of course.
Hmm.
Um, but definitely Yosemite itself and also just outdoor spaces in general could stand to be a bit more inclusive. The fact that someone could so easily mistake one of us for someone else just because we're vaguely the same race is disheartening to say the least.
Well, also because there's not that many, right? So I think that there was like a larger group of like BIPOC folks, especially like Black women or just Black folks in general in Yosemite. I think that probably would have not happened because I mean, yeah, I remember that happening growing up when we lived in places that were more culturally diverse, or ethnically diverse. So I only have experience being confused for other people when there was not many people who looked like me in those places. So they were like, "Oh, you're one of two," because there's really not many of you, which is
Yep.
sad.
Mm.
But something that came to mind when I was had asked you that question about Yosemite being like welcoming or inclusive was I remember even just visiting when before I was working there. I remember just walking around, like if you had been at work or something, or someone else I was visiting was at work. I remember just like hanging out outside and in like the housing area and people walking by and being like, "Hey, are you new here? Do you want to come hang out with us? We're going to the river. Like we're gonna go play volleyball, or like, hey, we're gonna go bouldering
Yeah.
over here. Like, do you want to come join us? Or hey, we're gonna go rafting." So I will say that was something that I remember experiencing. I can't say if it's still that way to this day. From what I've heard from newer people, it sounds like for newer folks who are entering into that community, because like we have experience when we had our first couple of seasons there. Other people who were also just entering into the park were also like looking to find friends. So I feel like that's still fairly true, although I can't speak from personal experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I was gonna ask you, so I mean, do you feel like you're represented in outdoor spaces or in outdoor recreation in public lands? And if so, where do you see that representation? And if not, where do you notice that the most that representation doesn't exist? Like, is there anywhere that's like really stands out to you?
I mean, I will say I have the unique experience of having a sibling, um, being pretty prevalent in outdoor spaces. Uh, I am always talking about you to other people, just in general, but also I have a lot of friends, or I've made a lot of friends, in outdoor spaces, and so like I like being able to name drop like, oh, my sister the ranger, or oh, my sister is working this really cool inclusive organization. And that's definitely been pivotal for me. Even not even just, to talk about it with other people, but to think about and to kind of thinking about representation and thinking about seeing myself in these spaces. Like, um, I find you inspiring regardless, but especially because, um, recreating outdoors and being in nature is so important to me. It's particularly inspiring to see you pursuing that, and kind of paving the way, not just for me, but for other people of color. Um, that being said, the experience that I had, um, in my first years in Yosemite and in outdoor spaces is still true now. Like, I'm still always pleasantly surprised to see, um, people of color in outdoor spaces. And like, there is something that like just warms my heart and like makes me feel at home, reminds me that I'm at home in outdoor spaces.
Hmm.
Um, when I see people, and I wish that I could think of a better way to put this, but like when I see people being black outdoors, like that, there's a video that you sent me
Yeah.
the other day. Um,
Oh,
and
I
it's
thought you were talking about that reel.
exactly. Yes.
Yes.
Like I love that. I think that is what I
Yes.
feel like is missing the most, in terms of
Mm,
representation. Like, yes, I have met a lot of like people of color, in national parks and things like that. I've met a lot of well, I've met a number of black people,
yeah, I wouldn't
in
say
these
a lot, but
spaces.
you've met
Uh,
them.
Um,
Yeah.
and like no shade to them. Like I'm glad we out here, but there is something that is, uh different, something pivotal about being authentically Black in these spaces, because not only are we here, but we're being ourselves. We're adding ourselves back into this space,
Hmm.
that we've been excluded from. So that in itself, and as well as, I don't really see that many, um, Black rangers, Park Service employees. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not really sure how I feel about that, but I'm also not really sure how I feel about the Park Service, so I'll leave that there. Um, but yeah, definitely, and also, oh, I don't know how to describe them. Like, I guess outdoor athletes, I
Hmm.
honestly could not tell you the name of a single like Black outdoor athlete,
Yeah.
period. Not even, I'm the first things that I think of immediately are things like, um, like climbing and hiking and things like that, because that's really prevalent in Yosemite. But the other day, we were talking about, I think a snowboarder or a skier, if I
Hmm.
remember correctly. I
Snowboarder.
didn't even know that that
Zeb
person exists.
Zeb Powell. Shout out to Zeb. I'll have to send you some
Yeah,
information about him because he's badass.
which
But yeah,
so cool.
again, and
Yes.
that's why when I asked you that, I was thinking, I was like, I wonder if you've heard of any other than like Zeb that I mentioned the other day. And that's when you said something a few moments ago that when you see other BIPOC folks, especially Black people in these spaces, that you're always pleasantly surprised. And that's the sad part. We should not have to be surprised. Like that's the fact that we're not expecting to see other Black people is really frustrating. I actually it was like perfect timing. I didn't get to tell you this, but I had a moment a couple of nights ago, and I was, out with Joe, my fiance, and for those who don't know, and anyways, we were like out at the social thing or whatever, and I'm used to seeing. I'm not surprised to see white people there, but and even then, there's like a Latina community, where I live, and so because they're the backbone of the community, but that's another story for another time. Anyways, I kid you not, I saw these two Black women with dreads, and I was like like straight up double take, instantly lit up, felt so warm inside just to see them. And I was like, oh, I need to go say hi. And so, anyways, eventually I did end up going over and introducing myself. And Joe was saying that from a distance, he like saw the interaction go down. He was like, literally, when they turned to see that you were coming, all three of you, like just like your whole bodies. It's like I didn't even know what you were saying, but I could just tell by your faces and your body language that you were just so happy. And like, yeah, we literally were like being Black outside. Like we were literally just being able to just be ourselves. And you know what I mean? We were like joking, like, oh, people probably gonna come to us and think that we're related. And we're like, ah, you know what I mean? Like just and it was so funny because when we saw each other, I guess they were telling me about how they had first met, and they were like, we literally just met like a month ago, and like when I saw her on the bus I was like, oh, we out here. So then they
Mm-hmm.
said when they saw me they were like, oh my gosh, there's another Black woman. I was like, yeah, because even in these spaces, if I'm seeing anyone who's Black, it's mostly usually going to be a Black man, and then every once in a really great while it's a Black woman. So to see two, I was like, there's three of us here, hold up, like we need to connect. So instantly, you know what I mean? We were just talking and they were like, we got to have like a dinner together. Like all of our people
Mm-hmm.
in town, we got to get together. But it was definitely a moment. And I literally like left like cheesing, like grinning from ear to ear and was just like so happy. So I'm starting to see that shift where I live in the Eastern Sierra. It's surprisingly this season was the first time I've seen that. Again, it's still like I'm surprised when I do finally see a Black person, let alone a Black woman. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the shift is happening. Luckily, that I'm starting to like notice it. Um, I wanted to ask you kind of a two-part question on like, are there any other voices that you feel like are missing in these spaces? And if so, like what would you like to see happening in the outdoors, whether that's like public lands, outdoor recreation, whatever. How do you feel like we could start to change what representation we're seeing in these spaces?
Um, Slightly shorter answer. I think that we collectively have a lot to think about in terms of how we're operating in these spaces and how we're maintaining these spaces, or the opposite of that. Um, a lot to think about. A lot of restructuring I think needs to be done, not just literally physically, but in our thinking and our perception of these experiences. So yeah, definitely something to think about in that regard. Um, Also, being like recreating outside, like you said, especially to a lot of people, especially a lot of minorities, is seen as a privilege, and not a right. Um, and I think that just is so frustrating, especially, working in national parks. I'll talk to people who have the privilege of visiting, because like, yes, I think everybody should be getting outside, but also going to national parks is certainly not easy and it's certainly not cheap, which I get. But I'll be talking with these people and they're like, oh my God, I could never do this. Like, I could never work in a place like this. I could never, whatever, I could never come out here and do what you're doing. And I'm like, I know that you don't know me, but if I can do it, you can do it. Anybody can do it. And I think that just in general is something that I wish more people knew about and thought about. And nowadays, whenever I meet someone especially if I'm in like relative proximity to a national park. I'm like, hey, have you been to this national park? Oh, you haven't? Oh, let me tell you how easy it is. Like, let me convince you that this is something that's worthwhile.
Mm,
So I would particularly say, feel like I try to have that conversation most often with I don't know how to put it. I mean, just like minority people, people of different minorities in general, but especially, living in California in the Central Valley, I interact with people who come from low-income families, um, and especially people who, like us, grew up in families that didn't really, kind of push a desire to be outdoors. I feel like those people are like, hey, I didn't even know this place existed. I didn't even know this was something that was meant for me.
mm,
Um, so that, as well as, I don't think we talk enough about the um, people indigenous to the lands that we are occupying. People kind of the colonizers, the settlers who just came into these spaces and said, hey, this is a beautiful sacred place. Let me, bulldoze it and put a parking lot in it. And like,
yeah.
yeah, we say stuff like that, flippantly, and I feel like there is some groundwork that's being laid by the people that are native to these lands. But I
Mm,
think these conversations need to um, happen with more frequency, and I think we need to amplify the voices of the native peoples of this land more.
definitely. Yeah, that's something I was gonna say, but I lost it. But yeah, I do agree. I think a big part of it is one, how there's how they're advertising, right, for these spaces, because where is that advertising taking place and in what what forms, but also what are the discussions that are happening around the outdoors. And that's definitely something I've thought about as well. Like when I've talked to friends who are like, oh my gosh, I don't know, like, I don't know if I could do it, or like, oh, that's so cool. I wish I could do that. I'm like, you can. You just move. Like, you just do it. You just get a job. And it's surprisingly really easy to to find jobs, I think. At least through like concessionaires, like through retail or like lodges in
Yeah.
national parks or even like in ski towns. There's I think a lot of work in like food and beverage, retail, things of that sort. Um, that customer service that people can find that's a good foot in the door into these spaces. So the opportunities are there, but I think that's the tricky thing. It's like neither one of us would have ended up in Yosemite if it hadn't have been for like my friend who had worked there and then
Yep.
shared it with me. And then I then shared it, was like, oh, they actually have pretty cheap housing, and you don't have to pay for utilities, and the pay is pretty decent, and you get to live in this beautiful place. But I mean, I don't think if anyone told us 10 years ago that we both would have worked in Yosemite and then how that would have affected our lives, I would have been like, what? And what's Yosemite? Where is that?
Hmm.
Yeah, before Yosemite, I'd never been to a national park before. I hadn't even thought about national parks. So I do wonder sometimes, you know, what could have changed for us, or like if there was like what could have happened earlier on in our lives for us to potentially have been introduced to the outdoors, or change our perception of spending time outdoors if somebody had a different conversation with us, or given us a different opportunities or experiences. So I am thankful for like the friends that I did get to go like fishing with or camping when I was younger, because I think otherwise it would have definitely felt even more foreign for me.
Hmm.
And even then, it's definitely been a learning curve still, living in this space and like getting used to it. And there's so many things that I'm now having to learn, that there's, people that I work with or live near who are like, oh yeah, I grew up doing this. And they're like, well versed in backpacking or skiing. And I'm like, I'm still figuring all this out.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, but it's been really cool to kind of be that gap. I think bridge that gap for my friends and other folks who like are not as familiar with how to even get started in any of these activities, or even just spending time in this space. And it's been really cool too, just to like share it with some of my friends who are like, oh, I don't like hiking, but I really like watching birds, or like I really like hanging out by water. It's like, yeah, you can do that too. There's no right or wrong way to go about this. So, um, well, thanks for joining. This is
Yeah.
interesting how the different ways that this conversation has gone. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to check to see if you have any final thoughts or things that you wanted to share on the idea of underrepresented voices in outdoor spaces, or just experiences that we've shared together, lessons learned, your journey, because you haven't shared
Mm.
all of it. So we can go into that some other time. Anything else that you want to touch on?
Let me think about it. Oh, um, hold on. I think two things. One, I think that a lot of the people that I have met in these spaces that are coming into them for the first time are uh hold on. I'm trying to gather my thoughts. Uh okay, two things. I think that I you and I were both really lucky that we were able to discover these spaces, um, especially at a younger age, you know. I feel like a lot of the people that we grew up with, a lot of our friends and school peers still don't know about this, and we're still trying to kind of educate them and be that bridge for them. So I think that, I guess, to kind of speak again on underrepresented voices, I think there aren't enough young people in these spaces,
Mm,
um, especially like younger, like not just us. I mean, we're relatively young, I guess. Ugh.
mm,
Um, but you know, like kids and especially like teens, I think that if I had been exposed to things like this at a younger age, I think it would have been very pivotal for me.
mm,
And I think I could say the same about the other people, the other kids that I like went to school with, and the other kids in my community. Um, there's something that is so monumental about being in places like Yosemite. It gives you that feeling of, being small. It humbles you. I certainly
mm.
needed that, and I certainly know that people in my community need that. I was going to say something else. Oh, yes. Speaking of things that people in my communities need, I think that part of the reason why that isn't happening, and or at least wasn't happening when we were growing up, is there's no, I don't really see a lot of, what's the word? Particularly growing up in California, I feel like we didn't really experience a lot of naturally green spaces, and even things like,
Mm,
like city parks and things like that. They were there, maybe if they were, but they weren't really highlighted. They usually weren't very well kept. They weren't
mm,
places that people saw as somewhere to recreate outdoors. And like, yeah, look, I respect the desire to have a good smoke spot or something like that. Um, but I think also maybe go back to that place in the daytime and throw a frisbee around or something. Not that I do that. I have terrible hand-eye coordination, but get out there and try stuff. And who knows, maybe I
yeah.
would actually like throwing a frisbee around if I gave it a try at a younger age and was able to develop that skill. But
Mhm.
I think that the urbanization of these green spaces is
Mm,
frustrating. Um, but I'm super grateful for the experiences that I've had. I'm really glad that I've been able to share those experiences with you, and that we've been able to grow through those experiences together. And I've met some really wonderful people, and it's really changed who I am. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. And I hope that other people can have those experiences as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really special that luckily we're both open to saying yes to those experiences, even if we didn't
Mm-hmm.
quite know what they were going to entail. I mean, just by saying just the idea of applying to a job in Yosemite and then saying yes and committing and seeing that through, um, in itself is still like a pretty big feat. But yeah, I think, we could have easily just chosen to not, and I think a lot of people do this too, who work in national parks, especially for the concessions and don't take advantage of their surroundings at all. And so they're just there to like, to work, and like I respect that as well. But I'm really thankful that we both had some shared experiences through both of us individually saying yes to different opportunities and the things that we've been able to like introduce to each other. And I think that's like not only helped us grow individually, but also like I feel like that's helped us grow closer because yeah, through having shared experiences, your relationship develops and that connection just grows a little bit deeper. So I'm really thankful for that. And something else I was gonna say. I lost it. Anyways,
Oh,
well,
little leg.
yeah. So, yeah, thanks for joining, and hopefully we can have you come back on. See what else we can talk about. But I'm sure there's plenty that we can cover. But yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Mm,
Even though you didn't get to
you're
choose to
welcome.
be my sibling, thanks for being my sibling. And
Thanks.
thanks for being cool.
Well, thank you for having me. I am definitely looking forward to watching you end this show. Whatever this ends up being, I look forward to seeing it grow and change.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. On a last thought, it's just that I think not only is it unique to have two siblings or like have any siblings work in a national park, but also the fact that we're both happen to be people of color, BIPOC, and on top of that, black. We're rare. We are rare breeds in these spaces. So I'm
Hmm.
so thankful that although I don't see myself represented very much in these spaces, I'm so thankful that I'm like, hey, at least my siblings out here and at least I got you. So yeah, looking forward to having some more adventures together.
Theme.
Yay. Cool.